Hey, thank you. Good morning. It's a great morning to be here. I am Tom McCabe, the CEO of the Freedom Foundation, which is a think and action tank based in Olympia. We stand for freedom and liberty, and we're excited to be here today to file a class action lawsuit. One of my predecessors, Bob Williams, the founder of the Freedom Foundation, stood on these very steps about 14 or 15 years ago after working with some teachers to file a lawsuit against the Washington Education Association. That lawsuit was filed in federal court, went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the Freedom Foundation won a 9-0 decision against the Washington Education Association. Our case today will help finish the job.
SEIU Local 925 unionized family child care providers in 2006. And Washington state law requires that all providers must be represented exclusively by SEIU. This prohibits each and every provider from petitioning the state on matters related to the provider's employment conditions, which are inherently political issues related to taxpayer subsidies and child care policy. This provision also forces plaintiffs to petition the state through the SEIU. The providers today bring a class action lawsuit under the First Amendment to challenge the exclusivity provision in Washington state law that forces them to be represented by SEIU even if they are non-members who do not want to be represented by the union. The exclusivity provision, the plaintiffs argue, and we argue, violates the plaintiffs' First Amendment rights to free association and to petition the state on their own terms, free of coercion. These providers filed this class action lawsuit to protect the First Amendment rights of all non-members of SEIU across the state. In the end, this case is about freedom, and these plaintiffs seek to restore the First Amendment rights to all child care providers all over Washington that have been taken from them by the governor and by SEIU.
We have four plaintiffs, Cindy Mintel, Roxanne Pera, Kathy Miller, and Irvina Mizell. They can't be here today because they have obligations to the children and the families that they care for. First is Cindy Mintel from Shoreline. She's been in the state for 55 years, and she's been a child care provider for 25 of those. She says, "I've never joined this union, SEIU, despite being visited at my home by union representatives. I have the right to free association, and I don't wish to associate with SEIU in any way, shape, or form." Then we have Roxanne Pera, who lives down in Vancouver. She's been providing care to children for 23 years. For me, this lawsuit is about taking a stand for what I believe to be fair. Irvina Mizell from Duval, Washington. She's been licensed as a care provider in this state also for 23 years. She says that the state of Washington and SEIU should follow the law set by Harris v. Quinn. Providers should be free to opt in to the union rather than being forced to opt out. And then finally, Kathy Miller from White Salmon, Washington. She's been licensed to provide care to children in this state for 16 years. Kathy says, "I used to be an officer in SEIU 925, but was very discouraged by some of the behavior I saw from within. I don't need SEIU to tell me how to think. I'm not interested in being part of an organization that cares more about collecting dues money for political gain than they do about their own membership." We are thrilled to represent these four brave providers who are standing up for their First Amendment rights against a union and against a statutory scheme in this state, which has for too long unlawfully and unconstitutionally taken their money and forced a representative on them.
Basically, this case does two things. It seeks to enforce Harris versus Quinn, where the Supreme Court held in June that it is unconstitutional for any state to require what they call partial employees. These are providers who receive subsidy payments from the state for doing various services for the state. In this case, it's providing necessary and needed child care. The Supreme Court said whenever the state requires those people to pay dues when they are not members of the union, that violates a First Amendment right to free speech and free association and free petitioning of the government. And the Supreme Court said that that could not be. Unfortunately, the state of Washington and the union have ignored the Supreme Court's ruling and have continued to take dues and continue to not follow Harris. So we are following this case to enforce Harris here in Washington. We are also seeking through this case to expand the Harris ruling. Our lawsuit asks the federal court here and ultimately the Supreme Court to rule that forcing employees or enforcing individuals to be represented by an organization they want nothing to do with, to speak on their behalf and to be their representative is also unconstitutional. Thanks again for attending.